Welcome to a true story from the history of the Cripple Creek Mining District. This video is copyright 2026 by Thomas Saunders. Sergeant Andrew Vogesser didn't have a particularly long life, but he lived an active one. He saw some of the events of the late 19th and early 20th centuries that were important in the building of the United States. He died in a mining accident in Cripple Creek, Colorado on July 11, 1912, and is buried with many other Civil War and Spanish-American War veterans in the Mount Pisgah Cemetery at the edge of Cripple Creek. In some ways, his life is typical of the lives of thousands of European immigrants who came to the gold mining district in search of their own American dreams, and in so doing, helped build the United States that we know today. But at the same time, he's a unique individual who I think you'll find as interesting as I do. Vogesser was born in Germany in January of 1867. He had blue eyes and dark hair, and as an adult was 5 feet 7 inches tall. In the 1880s, all young men in Germany were required to serve on active duty in the Imperial German Army. Vogesser would have served some time after he turned 17 in January 1884. In 1889, at 22 years of age, he immigrated to the United States. After working for some time farming, Andrew Vogesser enlisted in the U.S. Army in St. Paul, Minnesota on May 11, 1892. When he was 25 years old, he was assigned to the 8th Cavalry, Company A. By 1892, the biggest battles in what we now know as the Indian Wars were in the past. The U.S. Army was less than 30,000 men tasked with keeping the peace over the whole continent. Cavalry companies were generally called troops, and Troop A was posted to Fort Keogh near present-day Miles City, Montana. Fort Keogh also hosted infantry companies, a couple of all-black units with white officers, and Native American scouts. The men posted to Fort Keogh protected settlers from the east as they pushed westward. They policed reservations and tracked down those seen as troublemakers, both Native American and white. The soldiers generally acted as a federal police representing government authority in the area. They were also deployed to suppress railway worker and miner strikes in the West. Day to day, they maintained and repaired the buildings of the fort and were responsible for procuring some of their own food and firewood and coal for heating. And in Montana, heating in the winter took a lot of fuel. Of course, being a cavalry troop, the men of Troop A had to provide the feeding, training, and daily care that the horses needed. Like Vogesser, many of the men in the U.S. Army at the time were recent immigrants from Europe. In mid-August 1893, Andrew Vogesser, a sergeant at the time, competed in a 2-day revolver match. The match was part of a cavalry competition held at Fort Keogh between the Army Department of Dakota and the Department of the Columbia. The Dakota Department was made up of men from Minnesota and the territories of Dakota and Montana. The Columbia Department was made up of soldiers from Oregon and the territories of Washington and western Idaho. The revolver teams competed in 3 elements over 2 days: dismounted firing and mounted firing at 2 different distances. Vogesser scored among the top 10 men. Vogesser served for 3 years and was discharged August 1, 1895, at the regimental headquarters, Fort Meade, South Dakota, as a private, not the sergeant rank he held earlier. Since his discharge remark was very good, he may not have served as a sergeant long enough to be discharged at that rank. When the call went out in 1898 for volunteers to serve in the Spanish-American War, Andrew Vogesser was among a group of about 40 young men from Lead, South Dakota who enlisted in Troop A of the 3rd U.S. Volunteers Cavalry. The town of Lead, spelled L-E-A-D, was a gold mining town in Lawrence County in the northern Black Hills area of South Dakota. The Lead men would be traveling to Fort Meade just east of Sturgis, South Dakota, for the start of their basic military training. Monday morning, May 9, 1898, the newly enlisted men gathered in front of Firehouse 2 at 7:30. Many people from Lead and the area gathered on Main and Mill Streets as the new members of Troop A formed up and marched to the train depot, with hundreds of the people of Lead following them. The Lead recruits boarded a train and traveled to Deadwood, South Dakota, only a few miles away. Then with the Deadwood volunteers, they boarded a train to Fort Meade, a distance of just under 20 miles, where they would begin their new lives as volunteer cavalry troopers. After training at Fort Meade for about 2 weeks, Troops A, C, and D of the 3rd Volunteer Cavalry left for Camp Thomas at Chickamauga, Georgia. Andrew Vogesser was in Troop A, led by Captain Seth Bullock, 1st Lieutenant M.E. Wells, and 2nd Lieutenant James A. Cusick. These 3 troops were all part of the 3rd U.S. Volunteer Cavalry, which was nicknamed Grigsby's Cowboys. At Camp Thomas, Andrew Vogesser was reassigned to Troop C, commanded by Captain George Hare. Vogesser was appointed Quartermaster Sergeant by the captain. As the men who collect and distribute food, equipment, and supplies, quartermasters are important in the day-to-day operations of any Army unit, and reports indicate Vogesser was good at his job. The 3rd U.S. Volunteer Cavalry was never sent to any theater of the Spanish-American War. They were discharged from Camp Thomas at the end of the very short war. Sergeant Vogesser contracted a severe illness and was on sick leave when the regiment was mustered out. Sergeant Vogesser wasn't the only man to contract a severe disease at Camp Thomas. The camp was the largest training facility in the U.S. during the Spanish-American War, housing over 60,000 men. The camp is now infamous for being unsanitary and having been mismanaged. There was an extremely high death rate from disease, and hundreds of soldiers died who never faced enemy fire. Though it's unclear which disease Vogesser had, most deaths at Camp Thomas in 1898 were from typhoid fever, which was tragically common because of the poor sanitation. Officially, 866 died from diseases at the camp at the time, with thousands of others severely ill. The total American military personnel who died during the Spanish-American War, which was only April to August 1898, was over 2,000. Fewer than 400 of these were killed in action. The rest died due to disease. Vogesser was discharged at the rank of sergeant. Andrew Vogesser arrived in the Cripple Creek Gold Mining District in Colorado about 1900, just a couple of years after leaving the Army. After arriving in the Cripple Creek Gold Mining District in Colorado about 1900, Andrew Vogesser continued working as a miner here for the next decade. By 1910, he was living in the Linwood House, a rooming house located on East Carr Avenue in Cripple Creek that was run by Mrs. Harriet McVicker. On the night of February 10, 1910, 43-year-old Andrew Vogesser and some friends were in a bar commonly known as Moulton's Place in downtown Cripple Creek. Andrew was talking with Albert Seldler and other friends about his service in the U.S. Army when 28-year-old Walter Baker butted into the conversation. Baker didn't like the idea of foreign-born men serving in the U.S. Army and expressed his opinions boldly and in insulting terms. Among his statements, he said that American-born men were braver soldiers. Vogesser, who had served in the U.S. Army Cavalry, responded that it was the American-born soldier who was always the first to desert the Army. Given Vogesser's U.S. military career of serving from 1892 to 1895 and again in 1898, he must have known and respected many American-born soldiers. Perhaps he was just trying to get under Baker's skin. This wasn't the first time the two men had argued about the subject. Baker tried to take a swing at Vogesser, but someone interfered, and Vogesser and his friend Albert Seldler went outside. Out in the street, Vogesser was trying to convince Seldler, who was very drunk, that he'd had enough to drink for the night. Baker, his father, and a few other friends left Moulton's soon after. Baker walked up to Vogesser and Seldler at the corner of Bennett Avenue and 2nd Street and knocked Seldler down. Vogesser told Baker not to hit Seldler because Seldler was too drunk to defend himself. Then Baker knocked Vogesser down and leaned over him threateningly. He got Vogesser in a headlock and wouldn't let him go. Vogesser could not get away, and so defended himself. He pulled his pocket knife, and he slashed repeatedly at Baker. Baker was seriously wounded, with 4 slashing knife wounds in the body and 1 on his arm. The cut on his arm was severe, as was a wound in his left groin. Baker also had a puncture wound on his chest. The injury to his chest was dangerous. It was a deep wound that penetrated his left lung, leaving Baker at a real risk for pneumonia. Seldler and Vogesser, sporting a black eye, were both arrested and held in the Teller County Jail. At first, police were unsure who had used the knife. For his part, Baker told Teller County Sheriff Henry Von Pfuhl, spelled P-H-U-L, that he wasn't drunk at the time of the fight, saying that he had only had 4 small glasses of beer. From his bed in Sisters Hospital, where staff were still very concerned about his chances to live, Baker shared his version of the downtown street fight. He said that when he left the bar, he thought the argument was settled and with his own friends. He started home. He hadn't gotten far when he saw Vogesser and Seldler standing on the corner, and thinking Seldler had called him, he walked up to him. Baker stated that Seldler was verbally abusive to him, and he told Seldler that Baker's father had been very good to Seldler, and that Seldler was wrong to talk bad about the Baker family. Baker said that Seldler rushed him and he pushed him back, and Seldler was so drunk that he fell. Baker states that then Vogesser rushed him and the two grappled, and he had Vogesser in a chokehold and was pounding him. He didn't know he was cut. He thought Vogesser was hitting him in the ribs with brass knuckles. Vogesser broke away and hurriedly left the scene, and then Baker realized that he had been cut. In his statement to Sheriff Von Pfuhl, Baker brought up the subject of the original argument. He said that Vogesser was never in the Army because he had never left the district after he arrived 10 years before, and he thought that Vogesser was new to America when he arrived in the area. Baker was, of course, wrong about that. Vogesser had been in the Army for years before ever arriving in the Cripple Creek District. Baker was married, and he and his wife Alice were living in the rooming house ran by his mother Annie. He worked as deputy road overseer. His father was the Teller County road overseer. At the time, road overseers were in charge of road maintenance. Their job was to supervise road maintenance and hire crews as necessary to repair the roads, which were dirt, to fix ruts after rain and keep the winter roads passable. The snow wasn't removed with plows then, but rolled and packed to allow horses and wagons to travel over them, including the heavy mine wagons. Road overseers in Colorado controlled the spending of district road funds. They worked with local police and had the authority to prosecute individuals or corporations that damaged roads or obstructed traffic, or who otherwise failed to comply with road laws. Vogesser was well known and respected in Cripple Creek, but he had seriously injured the son of a man who was of some importance in Cripple Creek and Teller County. And William Baker himself saw the fight in which his son was so grievously hurt. Walter Baker was seriously injured, and at first it was reported that he was not expected to live. Sheriff Von Pfuhl soon sorted out who had injured Baker, and Vogesser was taken before Justice of the Peace, A.A. Stevenson, 2 days after the fight on the 12th. A bond of $2,000 was set, and Vogesser was bound over to appear in the district court the following Tuesday. William Baker, the injured man's father who witnessed the fight, filed a complaint charging Vogesser with assault with intent to kill. 5 weeks later, on March 17, 1910, after a short trial, Vogesser was found not guilty of assault with attempt to commit murder. Newspapers reported that the evidence presented indicated that the wounded man, Walter Baker, was always quarreling with one person or another. Witnesses also testified that others in Baker's crowd on the night of the fight were armed, and the paper speculated that the jury might have felt that Baker had started the fight. Walter Baker seems to have recovered well, and by May was home living with his wife Alice in the rooming house run by his mother Anna on West Masonic Avenue. In 1912, a district court rendered a $10,000 judgment against Andrew Vogesser. The civil suit brought by Frank Wennecke charged Vogesser had alienated the affections of Wennecke's wife. The court found for Wennecke and found Vogesser liable for the full $10,000. That sum would be equivalent to well over $300,000 in 2026 money. Primarily because of the judgment on June 20, 1912, Vogesser filed for bankruptcy in the Denver courts. For an idea of how much money that would have been to Vogesser, we must keep in mind that miners in 1912 working in Cripple Creek were paid on average $3 to $4 per day. Vogesser was a machine man, so he would have been paid at the top of the scale. Machine men operated the drills and handled the explosives. A skilled machine man knew where to drill the holes for the explosives, to break the most ore-containing rock from the rock face, while using the least powder possible. Andrew Vogesser was living at the Linwood House, a rooming house on East Carr Avenue, where he'd been for at least 2 years. By 1912, in the Cripple Creek Mining District, the days of a solitary prospector with a pick and shovel and his donkey were mostly in the past. The average quality of the gold ore was steadily declining, and mining here required sophisticated techniques. Large amounts of ore-bearing rock had to be processed to produce relatively small quantities of gold. This kind of mining required large sums of capital and industrial-scale processing. Most miners were no longer prospectors. Instead, they were paid employees of mining companies, which were becoming larger and larger, but there were options available to those who refused to work for wages. In the summer of 1912, Vogesser worked in the Mary McKinney mine, which was owned by the Mary McKinney Company. The company was incorporated in 1892 and headquartered in Colorado Springs. The mine was about 1 mile southeast of Cripple Creek in Squaw Gulch. Working for a mining company and earning a wage was fine for the men who could stomach that, and there were many thousands who did. But some of the men who came to the district were not built for that kind of employment. For men in the Cripple Creek district with an entrepreneurial spirit, it was possible to lease older, less productive properties. Lessees were willing to take on the expenses of hard rock mining for the chance to get rich. They paid mine owners between 15 and 25% of all of the net returns on the smelted ore they took from these mines. Chris Mark, who was 54 years old in 1912, and Fred Hassel, another miner experienced in working in the district, leased a property known as Yellowbird. Yellowbird was next to the Redbird property and located on the low-line electric rail line near Pisgah Junction, just south of the town of Cripple Creek. The Yellowbird mine was owned by T.J. Monahan of Denver. Mark was born in Norway and was 21 years old when he arrived in Colorado in 1880. He was married with children and lived and worked in Denver for a few years before relocating to Aspen, where the family spent 20 years. They arrived in Cripple Creek in 1908, and Chris had worked in mining for about 4 years in the district by 1912. He had been interested in leasing a mining property for some time before he and Hassel began looking at Yellowbird. He and his wife lived in town. One grown son, C.G. Mark, also lived in Cripple Creek, and he had another son living in Seattle. Accounts after the accident mention that Yellowbird was known by everyone to contain very dangerous levels of carbon dioxide gas. The mine shaft hadn't been worked in a few years, and on July 11, 1912, there was no windlass across the mouth of the shaft. A windlass is a cylinder held horizontally across the shaft, used to raise and lower weights. A cable or rope is attached to pulleys on the windlass, and buckets fastened to the pulleys. Windlasses are an ancient invention also used to raise buckets of water from water wells. With a windlass across a mine shaft, equipment and in some cases even men could be lowered into the mine and ore raised up. Windlasses ranged from the very simple, something like a piece of lumber with a hand crank added to one end, to quite elaborate structures of timber and iron, capable of raising heavy bucket loads of ore. That July morning, Mark and Hassel wanted to collect ore samples for assay, and even though they were aware of the yellowbird's history of bad air, the miners' term for a variety of poisonous gases, they prepared to descended the ladder into the mine without doing even the most basic testing. Sophisticated testing wasn't available at the time, but in a situation such as the one Mark and Hassel faced that morning, most miners would have probably taken the time to lower a candle or a carbide lamp into the shaft and watch to see how the flame reacted. For instance, a high concentration of carbon dioxide gas in the mine would smother a candle flame. They must not have realized how high the concentration of CO2 had become and how high the gas had risen in the Yellowbird shaft. As Mark stepped onto the ladder, Hassel was standing at the collar of the shaft, which is the exterior area around the entrance to a mine shaft and is usually reinforced to prevent collapse, waiting for his turn to descend. After Mark descended a few feet, he stopped to light a candle. As Hassel watched, Mark slipped off the ladder and fell 140 feet in the dark. At first, Hassel thought that Mark had stepped on a broken rung on the ladder. Hassel knew immediately that he had just seen his partner die. He hurried to town to get help to somehow retrieve Chris Mark's body from the bottom of Yellowbird. Hassel stopped at the E.H. Smith second-hand store for rope, gathered 6 men to help, and headed back to the shaft in a borrowed freight wagon. It was noon by then, and Andrew Vogesser had just gotten up. He had worked the night shift the night before at the Mary McKinney mine. At the corner of Bennett Avenue and 3rd Street downtown, Vogesser met Hassel and the other men, and they made room for him in the wagon. Vogesser immediately insisted that he would go down the shaft and retrieve Mark. As the wagon made its short way from downtown to the Yellowbird property, other men in the wagon volunteered to go down into the shaft after Mark's body, but Vogesser insisted. Someone suggested that they lower the lightest man in the party, but still, Vogesser insisted he was going into the shaft to bring out the body of his friend, Chris Mark. As the wagon with the retrieval party arrived at the mine, Vogesser grabbed the rope and ordered that he be sent down. Another man made to tie a rope around Vogesser, but he yanked the rope away and refused to be tied on. Vogesser instead tied the rope around a short board to make a seat he could sit on. One man wanted to test the air within the mine shaft by lowering a candle, but Vogesser insisted he be lowered without delay. Someone ran off to try to find a windlass, but still he refused to wait. A section of pipe was laid across the shaft, and a rope passed over it so that he swung in the center of the shaft. One man lit a candle to give Vogesser some light and started to hand it to him as he started down, but the candle went out when it was still a yard from the opening of the shaft. He wanted no further delay and would not wait to try to light the candle again. He continued to argue that the men immediately lower him into the shaft. When he was about 8 feet below the surface, Vogesser reached out to steady himself against the side of the shaft. He became unbalanced and slid backwards off his board seat, and like Mark before him, fell to his death. Others of Hassel's retrieval group said that they were willing to risk going into the shaft to bring out the 2 bodies lying 140 feet below. Why would anyone attempt to go into the shaft after just witnessing Vogesser fall? Even though the miners in 1912 knew of the dangers of bad air, as they called it, many at the time didn't understand that colorless, mostly odorless carbon dioxide in sufficient concentrations can quickly incapacitate even the strongest man and soon suffocate him by starving his body of oxygen. Many thought that their physical fitness and strength were enough to withstand the effects. By that point, the men gathered around the mine shaft realized that gas had caused the two men to fall to their deaths. A carbide lamp was lowered, but it was snuffed out a few feet below the collar of the shaft. The more experienced men present knew that they weren't equipped to deal with the gas that had overcome Mark and Vogesser, and they refused to let anyone else enter Yellowbird. By the summer of 1912, a recent breakthrough in emergency technology had come to the Cripple Creek District. With the assistance of the state government, the Portland Mining Company had recently acquired a few helmets equipped with rebreathers that would allow rescue teams to safely enter mine shafts that were full of poisonous gases. Known as Draeger helmets, they ran the rescuers' exhalations through chemical filtration to remove the CO2 and push that reoxygenated air back into the helmets for the men to breathe. So Fred Hassel and the men with him at Yellowbird sent word to the Portland mine for the rescue team with their new helmets. In the meantime, Coroner Hamilton arrived and set up a windlass to better facilitate the retrieval of the bodies of Vogesser and Mark. Experienced men among the witnesses reported that they could feel the depressing effects of the gas at the mouth of the shaft. While Hassel's original group of rescuers waited for the team from the Portland mine with their special equipment, a large crowd had gathered around the mouth of the mine shaft. Among them was Mrs. Tilly Mark, the wife of Chris Mark. She knew that Mark was working at Yellowbird that morning, and when he was late to come home for lunch, she went to look for him. When she approached the mine and saw the crowd, she suspected the worst and collapsed. Friends helped her home. Portland mining engineer Fred Jones and a crew of 4 men arrived at the scene in a company truck shortly after 1 p.m. All were equipped with the rebreather helmets and electric lights. Jones was immediately lowered into the shaft. Jones's helmet and reoxygenation apparatus allowed him to survive for the 30 minutes required to descend and tie a rope around Vogesser's body and then get back to the surface. At 2 o'clock, the body of Vogesser was pulled out of the mine shaft. Then another member of the rescue crew, Jake Grader, went into the shaft and retrieved the body of Mark. There were some tense moments at this point because a rope had pinched the airbag on his chest, restricting Grader's airflow, and he was in poor condition when he was pulled up. He recovered quickly after being up in the fresh air. Once the Portland team were on site at Yellowbird, the retrieval of both bodies only took an hour and a half. Andrew Vogesser was a man of action. After immigrating to America, he served twice in the U.S. military. He worked more than a decade as a miner in Cripple Creek, Colorado. He wasn't afraid of hard work and enjoyed working in the company of like-minded men. It's possible to look at Vogesser as impulsive or reckless. Though we don't know the details, he somehow came between a married woman and her husband. The loss of the resulting civil lawsuit was costly for Vogesser, and a couple of years earlier, he had jumped into a fight to try to keep a drunk and defenseless Albert Seldler from being severely beaten by Walter Baker. In that fight, he severely injured Baker, and ultimately, rushing into the shaft of a mine which he must have known contained at least some amount of poisonous gas, led to his death, an act that even the Cripple Creek Times newspaper at the time called reckless. On the other hand, the street fight and the attempted retrieval of Chris Mark's body could both be interpreted as Vogesser being protective of his friends. Maybe he could best be described as a man of his time and place, one of thousands of such men who helped build the foundations of America. Andrew Vogesser died on July 11, 1912, at the age of 45, and his funeral was held in the Thompson Claypool Funeral Chapel in Cripple Creek on the afternoon of July 14th. Civil War veterans and veterans of the Spanish-American War attended to show their respect. He was interred in Mount Pisgah Cemetery. This is the end of our video. Thanks for watching.